Welcome back to our payment processing course. I'm thrilled to have you with us for Module 2, where we will dive deep into the mechanics of payment processing. In this lecture, we'll explore the intricate process of how a payment transaction flows from initiation to completion. Understanding the anatomy of a payment transaction is vital for anyone in the payment industry, as it helps you grasp the technicalities behind payment systems that power online commerce, retail businesses, and financial ecosystems worldwide. The payment processing world can often feel complex, but by breaking it down into three fundamental stages, authorization, authentication, and settlement, we'll make it clearer and more understandable. By the end of this lecture, you will know the critical steps that occur behind every transaction, from the moment a customer enters their card details to when the funds are available to the merchant. So let's get started. 1. Authorization, the first step in payment processing. Let's begin by discussing the first stage of the payment process, authorization. This is where a transaction begins. It refers to the process by which a payment processor verifies whether the cardholder has sufficient funds in their account to complete the transaction. Here's how it works. Initiating the transaction. A customer enters their payment details into a point-of-sale, POS terminal, online payment form, or mobile wallet to initiate the purchase. Request for authorization. This information is sent to the merchant's acquiring bank, also known as the acquiring financial institution or acquirer, which forwards the request to the payment processor. The payment processor then routes the request to the card network, Visa, MasterCard, American Express, etc. Verification by issuing bank. The card network forwards the request to the cardholder's issuing bank, the bank that issued the card. The issuing bank checks the customer's account for sufficient funds and verifies that the transaction request is legitimate. Approval or denial. If the customer's account has enough funds and the card details are valid, the issuing bank will send an approval back through the card network to the acquirer and then to the merchant. The merchant receives the authorization and the customer can proceed with their purchase. If there are insufficient funds or any suspicious activity, the transaction is declined and the customer is notified. Key points to remember. Authorization is crucial for preventing fraudulent transactions. The time it takes for authorization can be a matter of milliseconds, but this is the moment that validates whether the transaction can move forward. This stage does not involve any money being transferred yet, it's just a temporary hold or approval. 2. Authentication, verifying the cardholder's identity. Once the payment is authorized, the next crucial step in the transaction process is authentication. This is the process of ensuring that the person making the payment is the actual cardholder and not someone trying to fraudulently use the card. 3D Secure Authentication. For online transactions, many card networks have adopted an additional security layer called 3D Secure, 3-domain secure. This is where the issuing bank asks the cardholder to provide further proof of their identity, such as a password, one-time PIN, or biometric verification. Multi-factor authentication, MFA. This has become increasingly common, where the cardholder must authenticate using at least two of the following methods. Something the cardholder knows, for example, a password or PIN. Something the cardholder has, for example, a mobile phone or security token. Something the cardholder is, for example, fingerprint or facial recognition. Response from the issuer. If the authentication is successful, the transaction proceeds to settlement. However, if the authentication fails, the transaction is blocked and the customer is prompted to try again or use a different payment method. Key points to remember. Authentication ensures that the payment is being made by the rightful cardholder and protects against fraud. This process often involves additional steps, especially for online transactions, to provide stronger security. Authentication techniques vary, but the goal remains the same, to verify the identity of the person using the card. 3. Settlement, completing the payment process. The final step in the payment process is settlement. This is when the funds are actually transferred from the customer's account to the merchant's account and the transaction is finalized. Let's break it down. Clearing the transaction. After the authorization and authentication, the transaction moves into the clearing phase. This is where the details of the transaction are transmitted to both the card network and the banks involved. In some cases, the clearing process can take place instantly or within a few hours. The clearing process determines the exact amounts owed by the customer and owed to the merchant. Fund transfer. Once the clearing process is completed, the funds are transferred from the customer's issuing bank to the merchant's acquiring bank.
This can be done via the card network, which acts as the intermediary between the two parties.
The amount is deducted from the cardholder's account, and the merchant receives the funds into their account after some processing time. Settlement timeframe. The time it takes for funds to reach the merchant's account can vary. For credit card transactions, it could take anywhere from 1 to 3 business days. However, some payment processors offer faster settlement options, especially for merchants with a high volume of transactions. It's important to note that the merchant may be charged processing fees, which are deducted from the final settlement amount. Reconciliation. This is the final phase where the merchant reconciles their records, ensuring that the payments and receipts match. Reconciliation involves checking the transaction amount, fees, and the actual amount received by the merchant. Key points to remember. Settlement is the actual transfer of funds and marks the completion of the payment process. This step can take time depending on the payment method, bank, and processor involved. Merchants need to manage their accounts effectively to ensure that all transactions are properly recorded and reconciled. Wrap up and conclusion. Now that we've covered the anatomy of a payment transaction, let's quickly summarize what we've learned. Authorization is the process of validating whether a customer has enough funds and whether the transaction should be approved. Authentication ensures the legitimacy of the transaction by verifying the identity of the cardholder. Settlement is the final phase where funds are transferred from the customer's bank to the merchant's bank. Each of these stages is crucial for ensuring the safety, security, and accuracy of payment transactions, and they work together to create a seamless and secure payment experience. In the world of payment processing, understanding these key steps helps professionals like yourself better navigate the complexities of the payment ecosystem, ensuring smoother transactions and better customer service. Interactive discussion points. How do you think payment fraud detection mechanisms have evolved with the introduction of 3D secure and multi-factor authentication? Why do you think settlement times can vary between payment processors? What factors might contribute to faster or slower settlement? I hope this lecture has given you a clearer picture of how payment transactions are processed. Understanding these processes is essential for anyone working in payments, as they are the backbone of every transaction, whether you're handling millions of dollars or a simple retail purchase. Thank you for your attention, and I look forward to seeing you in the next session.